Headbands are super easy to make and they're a great little sewing project, especially if you wanted to make some gifts. For this project, you'll need some fabric, elastic, scissors, a needle, some pins, something to turn it through with like a chopstick, a safety pin, some thread and an iron. You'll need to cut out 2 pieces of fabric, 16.5 inches by 6 inches, and these will form both sides of your headband. Then you'll need to cut out an elastic casing, and this is 11 inches by 3 inches. You'll need to cut your elastic to 7 inches. Ideally it's a 3/4 inch width, but it can be smaller. So for your head ties, fold one of them lengthways so the edges touch each other. Smooth it out with your hands, and then we'll give it a little iron to make sure that it lays flat, and this just saves us pinning. And you'll also need to do that with the other head tie. So you just fold up the edges lengthways and then smooth it out and give it a press. The next thing that we're going to do is to cut off that corner. We're going to create a 45-degree angle by folding the short edge over to the long edge, and that will give us a crease, and that crease with a little press will create a line for us to cut along, and that will then give us that nice little point for our tie headband. So just follow that crease with a pair of scissors and you can just trim it off. And then you're going to do exactly the same with the other side. Then you're going to be sewing up the diagonal line that you created and then along the top where the raw edges meet. You can use a sewing machine for this, or you can just do it by hand. If you're hand sewing, I would probably use a back stitch, or you could even use a running stitch. The next thing we're going to do is to turn the head ties out. So we're cutting off the 2 corners so that we get a nice crisp point, and then using something blunt like a chopstick, you can start to turn it through. So I start off with my hands, just turning it through. And then you can start to use the chopstick when that gets a little bit more tricky, and you can get a nice point. Once you've done the same to both sides, you can just smooth it all out, and then we're going to use an iron just to make sure everything lays flat. So you just need to roll the seams round to make sure that they're nice and flat, and then add a little bit of heat with the iron. So I've done the shorter side first, and then I'm just using my fingers to smooth out that seam. It can be a bit tricky once you've turned something through to get those seams to lay nice and flat. So with the combination of your hands and the iron, you can get it to lay nice and flat. So once you've done one side, then you need to do the same to the other, and now you've got your 2 headband ties ready. Now we're going to move on to the elastic casing. So we're going to fold it up lengthways with the right sides of the fabric facing each other, so the wrong side of the fabric is facing up. Give it a little press so that it lays flat. And then what you're going to do is sew again along the top at 1/4 of an inch. You can use a machine or do by hand. Then grab your safety pin and just pop it into the seam allowance just in the corner there. And this is going to help us turn it through really easily. So you slide the safety pin into the hole, wiggle it in, and then it gives you something to pull along so you can turn it through really easily. Once you've turned it through, remove your safety pin and then just smooth out the casing. It doesn't have to have the seam allowance at the top or the bottom, so you can just wiggle it around to the middle. It's a lot easier to make it lay flat, and you can give it a little press. Grab your elastic, put the safety pin through one end, and then we're going to feed it through the casing. Hold on to the end and just line it up at the edge of the casing. We're going to be sewing this, but for now we're just going to secure it with a pin. Pull the elastic out of the other end, remove the safety pin, and then you want to line up the elastic so it's just poking out a little bit, and we're going to use another pin to secure this end. Now you're going to sew the elastic at each end at about 1/4 of an inch or a bit less, just to secure it in place. So here's our casing, all ready to put together with the rest of the headband. So you want to lay one of your head tie pieces down with the pointy end sticking out of one end, and then we're going to be lining up the elastic with the flat end. You want to have the elastic with the wrong side up facing you, and then we're going to be wrapping the ends of the head tie around the elastic and securing it with a pin. Don't worry, I'm going to show you this again. You get the other side of your head tie and make sure that it is symmetrical, so your left and your right are symmetrical. Slide that over to sit on the top, bring your elastic casing over to the flat side with the seam facing up, and then wrap the end around the elastic casing, and again secure that with a pin. This can be a bit fiddly. If you've got clips, you can use those too. I'm going to show that once more, so I'm just going to repeat that section of the video, bringing it all together. So take your elastic casing with the seam allowance facing up, line up the raw edges with your head tie, and then wrap the bottom edge up, and then you're going to roll the top edge over, and then you're going to secure that with a pin. Now grab your other head tie and make sure that the points are symmetrical. Slide it over on top of the other head tie and then bring the raw edges together. Line it up and then roll the bottom edge over and then the top edge over, and then secure it with a pin. Once you've secured both ends with a pin, You need to sew it twice, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. This makes sure the elastic is well and truly caught and it is nice and strong. Then trim off any little wispy ends and then do that to the other side. And this is the magic bit. When you pull your headband tie round, you lose all of those raw seams and you can't see it, and it's nice and neat. Do the same with the other side and they disappear. Give the elastic a good stretch. That's a great little tip if you're trying to get your elastic to lay even. Just give it a good stretch when it's inside a casing and it will lay perfectly. The next thing to do is to style it, tie bows, have bunny ears, tie it in knots and tuck it in. It's entirely up to you, but just enjoy it and have fun.